Elaine Washington stood frozen in the crowded airplane aisle, her phone live streaming to thousands as the airline CEO personally apologized to her parents. 24 hours earlier, no one knew her name. Now her impromptu civil rights stand had sparked a nationwide boycott and changed aviation policy forever. Before we dive into this incredible story of courage and justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button. This journey through the unfriendly skies will show how one woman's bold stand against discrimination created ripples of change throughout an entire industry. Harold and Beatrice Johnson had been looking forward to this day for months. After 50 years of marriage, the retired surgeon and former school principal were finally treating themselves to the luxury cruise they had always dreamed about, but never felt they could justify. Their first-class flight to Miami would be the beginning of a 2-week Caribbean adventure to celebrate their golden anniversary. "Did you double-check your heart medication?" Harold Beatrice asked, meticulously going through her pre-flight checklist in their modest Atlanta home. At 73, Harold had developed a mild heart condition that required daily medication and a special diet, but he refused to let it slow him down. "Yes, dear, for the 3rd time," Harold replied, with the patient smile of a man who had spent half a century loving the same detail-oriented woman. "Maya made sure the airline has my meal requirements too." Maya Johnson, their 37-year-old adopted daughter, had arranged everything. A successful corporate attorney at Blackwell & Schmidt, one of Atlanta's most prestigious firms, she had spared no expense for her parents' anniversary gift. Though not their biological child, Maya had been the center of their world since they adopted her at 12 after she lost both parents in a car accident. "I wish she could come with us from the start," Beatrice said, carefully packing her carry-on bag. "She needs to finish that big case first," Harold reminded her. "Besides, she'll surprise us on the ship in 3 days. That girl works too hard." What Beatrice and Harold didn't know was that Maya had actually arranged to surprise them even earlier. She had cleared her schedule to join them on the 2nd day of their cruise, having arranged for her colleague to handle the final preparations for their corporate merger case. The Johnsons' excitement was palpable as they loaded their luggage into the rideshare vehicle. This trip represented more than just a vacation. For two people who had lived through segregation, the civil rights movement, and countless personal indignities, with unwavering dignity, this first-class journey symbolized how far they had come. "Remember our first trip together?" Harold asked as they watched the Atlanta skyline pass by. "That bus to Savannah where we had to sit in the back." Beatrice patted his hand. "And now look at us, flying first class to a luxury cruise. Times have changed." "Some things have," Harold nodded thoughtfully. "But not everything." Their driver, a young white man named Kyle, chatted amiably with them during the ride, asking about their trip and sharing stories about his grandmother who had recently celebrated her 80th birthday. The easy conversation reinforced their optimistic mood. Atlanta International Airport bustled with activity when they arrived. The couple moved slowly but purposefully through the terminal, Harold occasionally stopping to ease the strain on his back. At the check-in counter, a friendly attendant greeted them warmly, efficiently processing their tickets and checking their bags through to Miami. "You're all set, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. You have access to the premium lounge before your flight, and boarding will begin in about an hour at Gate C-17, the attendant explained, handing them their boarding passes with a genuine smile. In the exclusive lounge, they enjoyed complimentary refreshments and comfortable seating. Harold sipped a tomato juice while reviewing their cruise itinerary one more time. "Antigua Street, Lucia, Barbados," he read aloud. Maya really outdid herself planning this trip. "She always does," Beatrice replied, the pride evident in her voice. "That girl could have run a Fortune 500 company by now if she wanted." When boarding time arrived, they made their way to the gate where they were among the first passengers invited to board. The gate agent scanned their tickets and welcomed them aboard with professional courtesy. As they walked down the jet bridge toward the aircraft door, Beatrice squeezed Harold's hand. "Happy anniversary, Dr. Johnson," she whispered. "Happy anniversary, Principal Johnson," he replied with a wink. They stepped onto the plane with the hopeful anticipation of travelers embarking on the journey of a lifetime, completely unaware of the turbulence that awaited them. Not from weather, but from the darkest aspects of human nature that somehow still persisted at 35,000 feet. "Good afternoon," greeted the flight attendant stationed at the entrance of the aircraft. Her name tag identified her as Patricia. She checked their boarding passes and directed them left toward the first-class cabin. "Enjoy your flight." The Johnsons made their way to their assigned seats 2D and 2E in the second row of the spacious first-class section. Harold carefully stored their carry-on bags in the overhead compartment before helping Beatrice into the window seat and settling beside her. "These seats are so comfortable," Beatrice remarked, running her hand along the premium leather armrest. "I could get used to this." Their moment of appreciation was interrupted by another flight attendant approaching their row. According to her name tag, she was Rebecca Miller, a slim white woman in her mid-40s with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her smile appeared practiced rather than genuine. "Can I help you find your seats?" she asked, despite the obvious fact that they were already correctly seated. "We're right where we should be," Harold replied, politely handing her their boarding passes. "Seats 2D and 2E." Rebecca studied their boarding passes longer than necessary, her expression shifting subtly before she handed them back without comment and moved on to welcome a white couple taking their seats across the aisle. Her demeanor transformed instantly, her voice warming as she helped them store their luggage and offered pre-departure beverages. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield. So lovely to have you flying with us again. Can I get you anything before takeoff? Perhaps some champagne to start your trip?" The contrast was not lost on Beatrice, who exchanged a knowing glance with Harold. They had experienced this kind of treatment throughout their lives. The subtle shift in tone, the different quality of service, the unspoken message that they somehow didn't belong in a premium space. When Rebecca returned to their row, her professional veneer barely masked her coolness. "Would you like anything to drink before takeoff?" The question lacked the warmth and personal touch she had shown the other first-class passengers. "Water would be fine, thank you," Harold replied. "Just water?" Rebecca asked, as though their choice confirmed some private assumption. "Yes, just water," Beatrice affirmed calmly. As Rebecca walked away, a white businessman in his early 50s took his seat directly behind Harold. He nodded politely to the Johnsons before settling in. Thomas Hayes, according to the luggage tag on his briefcase, was immersed in his phone, but occasionally glanced up, seeming to notice the different treatment the couple was receiving. When Rebecca returned with their waters, she placed them on their tray tables with noticeably less care than she had shown with other passengers' drinks. As she turned to leave, her elbow knocked against Beatrice's cup, spilling water across her lap. "Oh," Rebecca said flatly, "let me get you a napkin." She handed Beatrice a single cocktail napkin, clearly insufficient for the spill, before quickly moving on without a proper apology. "Are you all right?" Harold asked his wife, offering his own napkin. "It's just water," Beatrice replied quietly, though the indignity of the situation was written across her face. As the boarding process continued, Harold noticed Beatrice shifting uncomfortably in her seat. The chill of the cabin was pronounced, and he knew her arthritis often flared up in cold environments. "Excuse me," he called politely as Rebecca passed by again. "Could we possibly get a blanket for my wife and perhaps an extra pillow for my back?" "We're very busy with boarding right now," Rebecca replied. "I'll try to get to that later." 20 minutes later, as Harold observed Rebecca bringing pillows and blankets to other first-class passengers who had made similar requests after them, he sighed softly. "Should I ask again?" he whispered to Beatrice. "Let's not make a fuss," she responded, the familiar phrase, a reflection of a lifetime of calculated decisions about when to speak up and when to endure. The white passenger seated behind them, Thomas Hayes, had been observing the situation with growing discomfort. When Rebecca passed by his seat, he signaled to her. "Excuse me, Hayes," said, "I believe the gentleman in front of me requested some pillows and a blanket earlier." Rebecca's expression tightened. "I'll be with them shortly, sir," she replied with forced politeness before walking away. Several minutes later, she returned and wordlessly handed Harold a single pillow. No blanket was provided. "Thank you," Harold said, maintaining his dignity. "But we also requested a blanket for my wife. We seem to be running short on blankets in first class." "I'll check again later," Rebecca responded, though Beatrice could clearly see unused blankets on her cart. As the final boarding procedures were completed, Beatrice needed to use the restroom. She stood carefully and made her way toward the first-class lavatory at the front of the cabin. Before she could reach it, Rebecca stepped into her path. "The economy restrooms are available toward the rear of the aircraft," she stated, gesturing toward the back. "I'm seated in first class," Beatrice replied evenly, her soft southern accent belying her growing frustration. "This lavatory is currently being serviced," Rebecca claimed, though no service card or personnel were visible. A white passenger emerged from the supposedly serviced lavatory moments later, and Rebecca immediately allowed another white first-class passenger to enter without comment. When Beatrice returned to her seat after being forced to walk to the economy section, she and Harold exchanged whispers. "Are we being oversensitive?" Beatrice asked quietly. Harold shook his head slightly. "No, but we know the drill." "All too well," she agreed. The familiar ache of discrimination settled over them as the aircraft prepared for departure. They had experienced it countless times before at restaurants and stores, at professional conferences. The Johnsons had built successful careers and raised a brilliant daughter while navigating a world that still, despite all progress, sometimes viewed their presence in certain spaces as an intrusion. Thomas Hayes continued observing the situation from his seat, his expression increasingly troubled as the pattern of differential treatment became impossible to ignore. He typed something into his phone, then placed it in airplane mode as the flight attendants prepared for takeoff. What should have been the beginning of a joyous celebration was already tainted by the persistent shadow of prejudice, a reality the Johnsons had hoped might finally be fading, but instead seemed to be following them even into the supposedly friendly skies. The seatbelt sign pinged off 45 minutes into the flight, and the first-class cabin burst into activity. Flight attendants moved efficiently through the cabin, preparing to serve meals and drinks. Rebecca distributed linen napkins and took drink orders from passengers, her demeanor warm and engaging with everyone except the Johnsons. When she finally reached their row, her smile vanished. "What would you like to drink?" "Cranberry juice, please," Beatrice replied. "I'd like to confirm my special meal," Harold added. "I pre-ordered a low-sodium option for my heart condition." Rebecca frowned slightly. "I don't have any record of a special meal request for you." Harold reached for his phone and pulled up his confirmation email. "I have the confirmation right here. It was acknowledged by your airline 3 weeks ago." Rebecca barely glanced at the screen. "Our meal service is prepared before boarding. If it's not on my list, we don't have it. Could you double-check, please?" Harold asked, his voice remaining steady and polite despite his growing concern. His medication needed to be taken with food, and the timing was important for managing his condition. "Sir, I've already told you we don't have it," Rebecca replied, her tone sharpening. "You'll have to choose from our regular menu options." "The confirmation shows the airline received and confirmed my request." Harold persisted calmly. "Could I perhaps speak with the lead flight attendant about this issue?" Rebecca's posture stiffened. "Are you refusing to accept what I'm telling you?" she asked loudly, drawing attention from nearby passengers. "Not at all," Harold replied, keeping his voice low and controlled. "I'm simply requesting to speak with your supervisor about a confirmed meal reservation that seems to have been lost." "You're becoming aggressive," Rebecca stated loud enough for everyone in first class to hear. Harold, who had not raised his voice or made any threatening gestures, looked genuinely confused. I don't understand how my request is being perceived as aggressive. Several passengers began to watch the interaction with concern. Thomas Hayes, seated behind the Johnsons, had already taken out his phone and appeared to be recording the encounter discreetly. I need you to lower your voice and stop threatening me, Rebecca continued. Despite Harold having done neither of these things. My husband hasn't raised his voice once, Beatrice interjected. He simply asked to speak with a supervisor about his medically necessary meal. Ma'am, please don't get involved, Rebecca snapped. This situation is already escalating. By now, the lead flight attendant, a man in his 30s whose name tag read Michael Parker, approached their row. What seems to be the problem here, he asked, looking directly at Rebecca rather than at the Johnsons. These passengers are being combative about a special meal they claim to have ordered, Rebecca explained before either Johnson could speak. I've explained we don't have it, and now they're refusing to choose a regular meal and making demands. That's not accurate, Harold began. Sir Michael interrupted. I need you to calm down. He is calm, Beatrice insisted. We both are. We're trying to resolve a simple misunderstanding about a meal confirmation. Michael barely acknowledged Beatrice's statement. Rebecca has been with this airline for 15 years. If she says there's no special meal for you, then there isn't one. But I have the confirmation right here, Harold said again, offering his phone. Sir, please put your phone away, Michael instructed. Filming crew members is against airline policy. I'm not filming anyone, Harold clarified. I'm showing you the meal confirmation email from your airline. By now, other first-class passengers had begun to murmur among themselves. Thomas Hayes stood up from his seat. Excuse me, he said, addressing Michael. I've been observing this situation, and these passengers have been nothing but polite. They're simply trying to address a legitimate concern. Sir, please return to your seat, Michael replied curtly. This doesn't involve you. Actually, as a Diamond Medallion member who flies with this airline weekly, I think it does, Hayes countered. What I'm witnessing appears to be discriminatory treatment. Michael's expression hardened. No one is being discriminated against. We're dealing with disruptive passengers according to protocol. They haven't been disruptive at all, another passenger, a woman in her 40s, chimed in. They've been incredibly patient, despite being treated poorly since boarding. Rebecca stepped away briefly and picked up the cabin phone. After a hushed conversation, she returned to Michael's side and whispered something to him. He nodded and then faced the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. The captain has requested that we address this situation immediately to ensure everyone's safety and comfort. What situation? Harold asked, genuinely confused. We simply asked about a confirmed special meal. Rebecca's voice came over the public address system. Attention in the cabin. We need assistance in first-class priority, level 3. The coded announcement sent a chill through Beatrice. She reached for Harold's hand as they exchanged worried glances. Minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a situation in the cabin requiring our attention, we'll be making an unscheduled landing at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. A collective groan rose from the passengers, many of whom began to glare at the Johnsons, unaware of the full context of the situation. This is outrageous, Thomas Hayes said loudly. These passengers have done absolutely nothing wrong. The woman across the aisle had begun recording on her phone as well. I want everyone to see what's happening here, she announced. Just as the aircraft began its descent, 2 air marshals emerged from the rear of the plane and approached the first-class cabin. They stopped at the Johnsons' row. Sir, ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and prepare to exit the aircraft upon landing, one of the marshals stated firmly. Why? Beatrice asked, her voice trembling slightly. What have we done? We've received reports of disruptive behavior threatening the safety of this flight, the marshal replied. Harold sat perfectly still, his face a mask of dignity masking deep hurt. We've done nothing disruptive or threatening. We simply asked about a confirmed special meal and then requested to speak with a supervisor when there seemed to be a misunderstanding. Multiple witnesses can confirm that Thomas Hayes interjected holding up his phone. I've recorded most of this interaction and these passengers have been nothing but respectful. Sir, please lower your phone, the second marshal instructed Hayes. Recording federal officers in the performance of their duties is prohibited. Then, record me instead, called out another passenger. These people are being removed because they're black, not because they did anything wrong. This is discrimination, plain and simple. Several passengers voiced their agreement, but the marshals remained unmoved. As the aircraft touched down in Charlotte, Rebecca stood at the front of the cabin with a satisfied expression barely concealed behind a mask of professional concern. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, you'll need to come with us," the first marshal stated as the aircraft taxied to the gate. With the dignity that had carried them through 7 decades of similar indignities, Harold and Beatrice gathered their belongings. Harold helped Beatrice into her jacket, his hands steady despite the humiliation washing over them. "This isn't right," Thomas Hayes insisted, standing to block the aisle. "I won't sit quietly while you remove these innocent passengers." "Sir, interfering with federal officers can result in your removal as well," the marshal warned. Hayes looked directly at Harold and Beatrice. As the Johnsons were escorted off the plane, several passengers called out words of support. Others filmed the procession on their phones. But these small gestures provided little comfort as the elderly couple was paraded through the aircraft and into the terminal. Their anniversary celebration derailed by the same prejudice they had faced throughout their lives, just at a much higher altitude. The small, windowless room in the Charlotte Douglas International Airport security area felt suffocating. Harold and Beatrice Johnson sat side by side on metal chairs, their carry-on bags placed against the wall as 2 Transportation Security Administration officers questioned them about the incident. "So you're claiming you didn't raise your voice or make any threatening gestures?" Toward the flight attendant asked Officer Daniels, a stern-faced man with a clipboard who had been taking notes for the past 45 minutes. "That is correct," Harold replied, his voice steady despite his rising blood pressure. "I simply asked to speak with a supervisor about my confirmed special meal that wasn't provided. According to the report filed by the crew, you repeatedly ignored instructions and created a hostile environment." Officer Wilson, the second TSA agent, countered. Beatrice, who had been silent for most of the questioning, finally spoke up. "My husband and I have been married for 50 years. We've lived through segregation, through the civil rights movement, through times when people who looked like us couldn't even eat in certain restaurants. Do you honestly believe we would jeopardize our anniversary trip by being hostile on an airplane?" The officers exchanged uncomfortable glances but continued their questioning. Meanwhile, Beatrice noticed Harold discreetly pressing his hand against his chest, a gesture she recognized all too well. "My husband needs his medication," she interrupted. "It's in his carry-on and he was supposed to take it with food over an hour ago." "We'll get to that shortly," Officer Daniels replied dismissively. "We need to complete our investigation first." "This isn't an investigation," Harold stated firmly. "This is harassment. We've answered the same questions repeatedly for nearly an hour. Either charge us with something specific or allow us to leave." After another 30 minutes of circular questioning, a supervisor finally entered the room. "We won't be filing any charges at this time," she announced. "You're free to go, but I should inform you that the airline has placed you on their no-fly list pending further review." "No-fly list," Beatrice echoed in disbelief. "For what possible reason?" "That's an airline decision, ma'am, not ours," the supervisor replied, already turning to leave. "What about our luggage?" Harold asked. "And our connection to Miami?" "You'll need to speak with the airline customer service desk about rebooking options. Your checked luggage will continue to your original destination." Released into the terminal with no assistance, no apology, and no clear path forward, The Johnsons made their way to a food court where Harold could finally take his medication with a hastily purchased sandwich. "Your color doesn't look good," Beatrice observed, worriedly placing her hand on her husband's forehead. "We should find a medical station." Harold's blood pressure had indeed spiked dangerously, a combination of stress, delayed medication, and the humiliation of being escorted off a plane for doing nothing wrong. At Beatrice's insistence, they located the airport's medical office, where a concerned nurse took his vitals. "Your blood pressure is 190/110, the nurse informed him. "That's dangerously high. I'm going to call for additional medical assistance." As Harold received emergency treatment to lower his blood pressure, Beatrice stepped outside to make a phone call, her hands shaking as she dialed their daughter's number. "Maya, something terrible has happened." She began, her voice breaking, as she recounted the events of the past few hours. Maya Johnson was in her office preparing for court when she received her mother's call. The transformation was immediate, from focused attorney to fierce protector in the span of seconds. "I'm on my way," Maya assured her mother, already grabbing her coat and briefcase. "Don't talk to anyone else from the airline. Don't sign anything. I'll be there as soon as possible." After ensuring her father was stable, Beatrice made her way to the airline's customer service desk, where she was met with cold indifference. "Your tickets have been canceled due to the incident," the agent informed her. "We can rebook you on a flight tomorrow for an additional change fee of $300 per person." "The incident," Beatrice repeated incredulously. "You mean when your flight attendant discriminated against us and then had us removed from the plane for no legitimate reason?" "Ma'am, I don't have the details of what happened. I'm just informing you of your options. My husband is currently receiving medical attention because of your airline's actions. We've missed our connection the first day of our anniversary cruise, and our luggage is now separated from us. And you want us to pay an additional fee?" By the time Beatrice returned to the medical station, Harold had been stabilized but was advised against flying for at least 24 hours. With their cruise departure rapidly approaching and no flight available, their meticulously planned anniversary celebration was falling apart. The Johnsons checked into an airport hotel where Beatrice helped Harold settle into bed before sitting heavily in the armchair by the window. For the first time since the ordeal began, she allowed her tears to fall. 50 years, she whispered, looking at their matching gold bands. 50 years of dignity in the face of this exact kind of treatment. I thought things had changed, Harold. Harold reached for her hand. Some things have. Some haven't. I'm so tired, Beatrice admitted, her voice catching. So tired of having to be twice as polite, twice as patient, twice as perfect, just to be treated with basic human decency. As Beatrice sat beside her husband in that impersonal hotel room, their anniversary cruise sailing without them, videos of their removal from the aircraft were already spreading across social media platforms. Thomas Hayes had posted his footage with a detailed account that contradicted the airline's official statement about disruptive passengers. The hashtag number Justice for Johnsons began trending as more passengers from the flight shared their recordings and testimonies. By evening, the story had been picked up by several news outlets with headlines questioning the airline's treatment of the elderly black couple. Meanwhile, Maya had been busy during her flight to Charlotte. Using her legal expertise and network of contacts, she had already begun building a case against the airline, documenting every aspect of the discrimination her parents had faced. She had also reached out to her journalist friend Aisha Robinson, who worked at a major news network, ensuring that the story would receive proper coverage. Do you believe what happened to the Johnsons is still common in America today? Comment number 1. If you think racial discrimination in customer service is still widespread, or number 2, if you think this was just an isolated incident. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that expose injustice and celebrate those who stand against it. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination like this on a flight? Would you speak up like Thomas Hayes did, or would you stay silent? And what do you think Maya will do next to fight for her parents' dignity and rights? The airline has no idea what's coming their way, but they're about to learn a powerful lesson about messing with the wrong family. Maya Johnson strode through the Charlotte Airport terminal with the focused intensity that had made her one of the most formidable attorneys in Atlanta. Her tailored suit and confident gait caused people to step aside, unconsciously sensing the determination radiating from her 5'8" frame. She found her parents in their hotel room, her father resting in bed while her mother sat vigilantly nearby. The sight of these two pillars of strength, people who had guided countless students and saved numerous lives throughout their careers, looking so defeated, ignited something primal within her. "I want you to tell me everything," Maya said after embracing them both. "Every single detail from the moment you boarded until now." For the next hour, Beatrice and Harold recounted their experience, while Maya recorded their statements and took meticulous notes. She photographed Harold's boarding pass, his special meal confirmation email, and the medical report from the airport clinic, documenting his elevated blood pressure. "This ends today," Maya declared when they finished. "Not just for you, but for everyone who's ever been treated this way." She made a quick call to her colleague Jackson Williams, requesting that he join her in Charlotte immediately with the case files she needed. As one of the few other Black attorneys at her firm, Jackson understood implicitly the significance of what she was undertaking. "I've already pulled precedents on similar discrimination cases," Jackson told her over the phone. "I'll be on the next flight out." Maya's multi-pronged strategy took shape quickly. First, the legal approach. She would file complaints with the Federal Aviation Administration, the Department of Transportation, and the airline itself. Second, media pressure. Her friend Aisha Robinson was already preparing an investigative report for her network. Third, corporate leverage. Maya would mobilize her extensive network of high-profile clients and contacts to apply pressure from within the business community. While waiting for Jackson's arrival, Maya created a dedicated hashtag campaign number, Flying While Black. Within hours, thousands of similar stories began pouring in, revealing a pattern of discrimination that extended far beyond her parents' experience. The airline's initial response came that evening through a terse press statement. "Regarding the incident on Flight 3762, our crew members followed standard protocol for addressing disruptive passengers. The safety and comfort of all passengers is our top priority, and we stand by the actions of our professional team members. We cannot comment further on an ongoing investigation." Maya read the statement aloud to her parents, her voice steady, but her eyes flashing with determination. "They're trying to paint you as troublemakers. Standard corporate defense: deny, deflect, and wait for the story to blow over." She set her phone down. They have no idea who they're dealing with. By morning, Jackson had arrived with the case files Maya had requested. Together, they set up a makeshift office in the hotel room. "I've been researching this flight attendant," Rebecca Miller Jackson reported. "She has multiple passenger complaints in her file, 3 of them specifically from minority passengers, alleging discriminatory treatment." Maya nodded, unsurprised. "And the airline's response to those complaints?" "Dismissed for insufficient evidence in each case," Jackson replied. "But here's where it gets interesting. She's the niece of a senior vice president at the airline. That might explain the protective treatment." This information only strengthened Maya's resolve. She spent the next several hours on conference calls with civil rights organizations, while Jackson compiled testimonies from passengers who had witnessed the incident and were willing to go on record. Meanwhile, Aisha Robinson's preliminary report aired on the evening news, featuring interviews with Thomas Hayes and 2 other passengers from the flight who corroborated the Johnsons' account. "The airline contacted me 3 times trying to get me to retract my statement," Hayes told Aisha on camera. "They even offered me bonus miles and upgrade certificates. But I won't be silenced about what I saw. It was textbook discrimination, plain and simple." The report also included footage from several passenger videos showing Harold and Beatrice being escorted off the plane despite having done nothing wrong. The contrast between their dignified bearing and the unjust treatment they received resonated with viewers nationwide. Maya helped her parents file formal complaints with the FAA and Airline, documenting every detail of the incident and citing specific violations of federal transportation regulations. She also prepared the groundwork for a potential civil rights lawsuit, though she hoped it wouldn't come to that. Litigation is a last resort, she explained to her parents. The discovery process would be intrusive, and trials can drag on for years. My goal is to force accountability and systemic change through pressure and negotiation. That evening, Maya arranged for her parents to continue their journey, though not as originally planned. A competing airline, sensing a public relations opportunity, offered the Johnsons complimentary first-class tickets to Miami. "You should still enjoy your anniversary cruise," Maya insisted as she helped them pack. "I'll handle everything else from here." "We raised a warrior," Harold said, proudly embracing his daughter. "You taught me to fight the good fights," Maya replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Now let me fight this one for you." After seeing her parents off, Maya returned to the hotel to find Jackson had made a significant discovery. Through a contact at the airline, he had obtained internal documents showing that the company's diversity training program had been drastically reduced over the previous 2 years as a cost-cutting measure. They eliminated mandatory bias training for experienced staff, Jackson explained. Rebecca Miller hasn't had any cultural sensitivity training in over 3 years. "So we have a systemic failure on top of individual discrimination," Maya noted, adding this information to their growing file. Her phone rang. It was Dennis Wilson, the airline CEO, finally responding to her multiple contact attempts. "Miss Johnson, I understand you're upset about your parents' experience," he began, his tone carefully measured. "We'd like to offer them our sincere apologies and compensation in the form of travel vouchers and bonus miles." "Mr. Wilson," Maya replied coolly, "I'm not calling as a concerned daughter, though I certainly am that. I'm calling as an attorney preparing to file a class action lawsuit against your airline for a documented pattern of discriminatory practices that violate federal transportation regulations and civil rights laws." A long silence followed before Wilson spoke again. "I'm sure we can resolve this without resorting to legal action. What exactly are you looking for?" "Justice, accountability, and systemic change," Maya answered. "And none of those things begin with travel vouchers or confidential settlements." After ending the call, Maya turned to Jackson. "They're worried, but not worried enough. Time to escalate." The next morning, Maya executed the boldest move in her strategy. She booked a first-class ticket on the exact same route her parents had attempted to fly, requesting a seat in Rebecca Miller's service section. Through contacts provided by supportive flight attendants from other crews, she had confirmed that Rebecca was indeed working that flight. As Maya boarded the aircraft, she felt a calm determination settle over her. This wasn't just about her parents anymore, it was about every person who had ever been made to feel less than human because of the color of their skin. It was about changing a system that still allowed such treatment to occur without consequences. What she didn't know was that her live stream of what would happen next would change airline policy forever. By the time Maya boarded her strategic flight, the story of Harold and Beatrice Johnson had become a national talking point. Number Flying While Black trended across social platforms, with thousands sharing similar experiences of discrimination in air travel. Major news outlets had picked up the story, featuring interviews with passengers who witnessed the incident. Celebrity figures with large social media followings began amplifying the Johnson story. A prominent film director tweeted, "I've flown this airline for years. Not anymore. Number Flying While Black." A chart-topping musician shared the video with her 50 million followers, writing, "This could be your grandparents. This is America in 2023. Number Flying While Black." Several civil rights organizations issued statements calling for investigation and accountability. A group of congressional representatives demanded that the Department of Transportation examine the airline's practices. The public pressure was building with unprecedented speed. The airline's stock price had dropped 7% since the incident went viral, representing hundreds of millions in lost market value. Their social media accounts were flooded with negative comments and boycott threats. Corporate clients began quietly shifting their business travel contracts to competitors. Maya was keenly aware of this growing pressure as she settled into her first-class seat. She wore a tailored black suit, professional, understated, and intentionally non-threatening. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her makeup minimal. She had deliberately made herself as unobtrusive as possible, creating conditions that would make any discriminatory treatment all the more obvious. "Can I get you a pre-departure beverage?" asked a flight attendant who wasn't Rebecca. "Just water, please," Maya replied with a polite smile. When Rebecca Miller finally appeared in her section, Maya observed her closely. Rebecca moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, warmly greeting white passengers while maintaining cool professionalism with the few passengers of color. Maya activated the voice memo app on her phone, legally recording in the single-party consent state. When Rebecca approached her row, Maya made the same requests her father had made: confirmation of a special meal, order an extra pillow and a blanket. Predictably, Rebecca's response lacked the warmth she'd shown to other passengers. "We're very busy with boarding right now. I'll check on that later." Just as her parents had experienced, Maya watched as Rebecca promptly fulfilled similar requests from white passengers seated nearby. Thomas Hayes had been right. The pattern was textbook discrimination, subtle enough to provide plausible deniability, but obvious to anyone paying attention. Midway through the flight, after documenting multiple instances of differential treatment, Maya finally set her plan in motion. She pressed the call button, waiting patiently as Rebecca deliberately attended to other passengers first. "Yes," Rebecca asked when she finally arrived, her tone making the simple words sound like an imposition. "I've been waiting for the blanket and pillow I requested during boarding," Maya stated calmly. "I've noticed you've provided them to several other passengers who requested them after I did." Rebecca's expression hardened. "As I told you earlier, we're limited on supplies. I'll check again when I have time." "That's interesting," Maya replied, her voice level but clear enough to be heard by nearby passengers. "Because I've been observing a pattern of service discrimination since boarding, with passengers of color receiving consistently different treatment than white passengers." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. "Excuse me. For instance," Maya continued, "you've refilled the white gentleman's drink in 3A twice without being asked, while ignoring the empty glass of the Latina woman in 4C, despite her pressing the call button 3 times. Several passengers were now openly watching the interaction. Maya maintained perfect composure as she continued. "You've addressed white passengers by name and with a smile, while maintaining cold professionalism with passengers of color. You've promptly fulfilled comfort requests from white passengers while delaying or ignoring identical requests from non-white passengers." Rebecca's face flushed. "That's absolutely not true. I treat all passengers equally. I've been documenting these discrepancies since boarding," Maya informed her, "just as passengers documented similar treatment of my parents' doctor, Harold, and Principal Beatrice Johnson, when you had them removed from their flight 2 days ago for requesting a confirmed special meal." The cabin grew silent as recognition dawned on Rebecca's face. Maya stood slowly, maintaining a non-threatening posture as she addressed not just Rebecca, but the entire first-class cabin. "My name is Maya Johnson. I'm a corporate attorney and the daughter of the couple you discriminated against and had removed from their anniversary flight. But more importantly, I'm a black woman who's tired of watching people who look like me be treated as less than human." Passengers began pulling out phones, recording the confrontation. Maya spoke clearly, her words measured and precise. 2 days ago, my 73-year-old parents were humiliated, removed from a flight, and subjected to interrogation. for simply requesting the special meal they had confirmed in advance. My father, who has a heart condition, suffered a dangerous spike in blood pressure as a result. She turned to address Rebecca directly. You weaponized your authority against them, calling them aggressive and threatening when they were neither. You used coded language and false claims to remove them from a flight they had every right to be on. Rebecca glanced desperately toward the front of the cabin where the lead flight attendant stood watching in shock. I need to speak with my supervisor, she muttered, attempting to retreat. That's exactly what my father asked to do, Maya pointed out, before you had him and my mother removed from the aircraft. A white passenger seated across the aisle stood up. I saw the video of what happened to your parents. It was disgraceful. Another passenger, a South Asian woman, added, I fly this route every week and have experienced similar treatment many times. The lead flight attendant approached, trying to de-escalate the situation. Ma'am, please take your seat. We can discuss your concerns after landing. With respect, Maya replied, that's not acceptable. My parents were removed from a flight for far less than what I'm doing now, yet you're offering me the courtesy of discussion they were denied. That disparity is precisely the problem. Maya's live stream, which she had discreetly started before standing up, was now being watched by thousands of viewers in real time. Comments and support flooded in as she calmly but firmly held her ground. This isn't just about my parents, she continued, addressing everyone in the cabin and by extension her growing online audience. It's about every person who has ever been made to feel less than human because someone in authority decided their dignity was optional. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants prepare for landing. Maya looked confused. We're only 45 minutes into a 2-hour flight. The lead flight attendant leaned in and spoke quietly. The captain has decided to return to Charlotte. Management is waiting to address this situation on the ground. As the plane began its descent, passengers throughout the cabin expressed their frustration not with Maya but with the airline's handling of the situation. Several offered to serve as witnesses for any legal action she might pursue. When the aircraft landed and taxied to the gate, Maya remained calmly in her seat. Unlike her parents, she was not asked to gather her belongings or escorted off the plane. Instead, the jetway door opened to reveal a group of airline executives, including the Chief Operating Officer, Patricia Reynolds. Miss Johnson Reynolds said as she approached Maya's seat, We'd like to speak with you privately about this situation. I have nothing to hide, Maya replied, gesturing to the other passengers. These people have witnessed the same pattern of behavior that my parents experienced. Whatever you have to say can be said right here. Reynolds glanced uncomfortably at the phone, still recording the interaction. We take these allegations very seriously and want to assure you we're launching a full investigation. An investigation would have been appropriate before my parents were removed from their flight, Maya pointed out. Instead, they were treated as guilty without evidence or due process. As passengers began to deplane, many stopped to express support to Maya and share contact information, offering to provide statements about what they had witnessed. Thomas Hayes, who had been in contact with Maya since her parents' incident, had arranged for journalists to be waiting in the terminal. Rebecca Miller was escorted from the aircraft by airline security, her face rigid with barely controlled anger. The live stream continued to record as Maya finally gathered her belongings and walked calmly into the terminal where news cameras waited. The airline's carefully crafted narrative was crumbling in real time, and the executives knew it. What had begun as one couple's humiliating experience had evolved into a nationwide movement calling out decades of normalized discrimination. And Maya Johnson was just getting started. The next morning, Airline CEO Dennis Wilson requested an urgent meeting with Maya. She agreed, but on her terms. The meeting would take place at her parents' hotel with Thomas Hayes and 3 other witnesses present. She had no intention of allowing the airline to control the narrative through a private conversation that could be denied later. Maya arrived 15 minutes early. accompanied by her colleague Jackson Williams and Aisha Robinson, whose presence ensured that any agreements would be documented by a journalist of record. Maya wore a navy blue suit, her hair styled naturally, a deliberate choice to embrace her identity rather than conforming to corporate expectations of professionalism that often penalize Black women for their natural appearance. "You've created quite a situation," Miss Johnson, Dennis Wilson remarked as he entered the conference room flanked by the airline's chief legal counsel and head of public relations. "I didn't create anything," Mr. Wilson, Maya replied calmly. "I simply exposed what was already there." Wilson's expression tightened. "We'd like to resolve this situation quickly and amicably. We're prepared to offer your parents a generous compensation package, including lifetime platinum status with our airline." "My parents have no interest in flying with your airline ever again," Maya informed him, "and I'm not here to negotiate hush money." She slid a folder across the table. "These are our non-negotiable demands for resolution." The airline's legal counsel, a stern woman named Eleanor Pearson, opened the folder and scanned its contents with growing alarm. "This is unreasonable," Pearson stated flatly. "A complete overhaul of our training programs, third-party auditing of customer service interactions, public disclosure of discrimination complaints. These demands would cost millions to implement. Considerably less than what you'll lose in a class action lawsuit and continued boycott," Maya pointed out. "My live stream yesterday has been viewed 8 million times. Your stock has dropped 12%. Corporate clients are already canceling contracts." Thomas Hayes, seated beside Maya, nodded in confirmation. "My own company has suspended our business account with your airline pending resolution of this situation." "That's a 7-figure annual contract you've lost." Wilson looked increasingly uncomfortable. "We acknowledge that the situation with your parents was regrettable, but—" "Regrettable," Maya interrupted. "My 73-year-old father with a heart condition was publicly humiliated and physically removed from a flight for requesting his confirmed special meal. My mother was forced to walk to the back of the plane to use the restroom despite paying for first-class tickets. Both were detained and interrogated for hours. My father suffered a dangerous spike in blood pressure that required emergency medical intervention." She leaned forward. "That's not regrettable, Mr. Wilson. That's actionable discrimination that violated federal transportation regulations, the Air Carrier Access Act, and civil rights laws." Wilson turned to his PR director with a questioning look. "We've prepared a statement expressing our sincere regrets about the misunderstanding the PR director offered weekly." "Misunderstanding," Maya repeated her tone, making the words sound absurd. "Let me be perfectly clear. There was no misunderstanding. There was deliberate discrimination, followed by a calculated attempt to justify that discrimination through false claims of aggressive behavior." She opened her laptop and turned it toward Wilson. "This is an internal email from your Diversity and Inclusion Department from last year, expressing concern about the reduction in anti-bias training hours. It specifically warns that the cuts could lead to increased incidents of discriminatory customer service." Wilson's face paled. "How did you get that?" "I have my sources," Maya replied. "Just as I have sources who provided documentation of 17 similar incidents in the past year alone, all involving the same pattern: passengers of color being removed from flights for normal customer service requests that were characterized as aggressive or threatening." The airline executives exchanged concerned glances. Maya pressed her advantage. "Here's what's going to happen," she stated with quiet authority. "You're going to implement every demand in that folder. You're going to issue a public apology to my parents that acknowledges the discriminatory treatment they experienced. You're going to terminate Rebecca Miller's employment, along with any managers who enabled her pattern of behavior. And you're going to establish a passenger bill of rights that includes specific protections against discrimination. And if we refuse, the legal counsel asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer, then I file a class action lawsuit on behalf of every passenger who has experienced similar discrimination," Maya replied. I release the internal documents I've obtained to the media. And I continue the public campaign that's already cost you hundreds of millions in market value." She closed her laptop. "I'm not just an angry daughter, though. I certainly am that. I'm a corporate attorney who understands exactly how to hit companies where it hurts most, their bottom line and public reputation." After a tense silence, Wilson sighed deeply. "We'll need time to review your demands and consult with our board." "You have 24 hours, Maya stated. After that, I proceed with the lawsuit and release everything I have to the media." As the airline executives filed out, Thomas Hayes remained behind with Maya and her team. "That was masterful," he commented. "I've been in plenty of high-stakes negotiations, but I've rarely seen someone hold all the cards so completely." Maya shook her head slightly. "I don't hold all the cards. What I have is the truth and the moral high ground. Sometimes that's enough." Later that evening, Maya received word that the airline's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. By morning, they had agreed to implement every one of her demands, with minor modifications to the timeline for rolling out the new training programs. The public apology came first. A video statement from Dennis Wilson personally apologizing to Harold and Beatrice Johnson for the discriminatory treatment they experienced. He acknowledged that the incident reflected systemic issues within the company culture and announced a comprehensive plan to address those issues. Rebecca Miller and 2 supervising managers were terminated. The airline announced a partnership with civil rights organizations to completely revamp their diversity training and customer service protocols. And most significantly, they agreed to establish an independent review board to assess discrimination complaints with findings to be published quarterly. Maya had achieved everything she set out to do. But as she watched the airline's stock begin to recover following the announcement of these changes, she understood that the real victory wasn't in punishing the company, it was in transforming it. "You've created a template that other industries could follow," Aisha Robinson told her during an interview for her network. "This isn't just about airlines anymore. It's about holding any company accountable for how they treat people of color." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "That was always the goal. My parents spent their careers helping others, my father as a surgeon, my mother as an educator. They taught me that true justice isn't about vengeance, it's about creating positive change." What neither Maya nor the airline executives could have anticipated was how quickly that change would spread beyond a single company to transform an entire industry's approach to bias and discrimination. 3 days after the airline agreed to Maya's demands, she received an unexpected phone call from Dennis Wilson. "Miss Johnson, I'd like to meet with you again," the CEO said, his tone noticeably different from their previous interaction. "Not to negotiate or contest our agreement, but to discuss how we might work together to implement these changes effectively." Maya was surprised, but cautiously optimistic. "I'm listening. Our initial analysis shows that the issues you identified are more pervasive than we realized," Wilson admitted. "We need expertise to address them properly, and frankly, you've demonstrated exactly the kind of insight and approach we need." The meeting took place at the airline's headquarters, where Maya was shown into a conference room filled with senior executives and board members. The atmosphere was markedly different from their previous encounter, less defensive, more collaborative. "We've been doing damage control for so long that we lost sight of the actual damage," Wilson began. "The data you presented forced us to conduct a deeper internal review, and what we found was troubling." He displayed a series of charts showing complaint patterns that correlated strongly with passengers' race and ethnicity. Another slide revealed dramatic disparities in how customer service issues were resolved based on the customer's perceived background. "This isn't just about Rebecca Miller or your parents' experience," Wilson continued. "It's about a systemic failure that we need to address comprehensively." Maya listened intently, maintaining her professional composure despite her surprise at this apparent epiphany. "I appreciate your candor, Mr. Wilson. What exactly are you proposing?" We'd like to retain you as a special consultant to help reshape our entire approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion, he replied. Not just in customer service, but throughout our organization. Maya raised an eyebrow. Why me specifically? There are numerous diversity consultants with more experience in the airline industry. Because you did what none of them managed to do? Wilson answered honestly. You made us care about this issue in tangible, measurable ways that our shareholders and board couldn't ignore. The offer was compelling, but required careful consideration. Maya didn't want to be a token or a publicity stunt. She needed to ensure any collaboration would result in meaningful change. I'll need complete access to your data policies and personnel, she stipulated, and I'll require documented commitments to implement the recommendations my team develops. Agreed, Wilson nodded. We're prepared to be fully transparent and accountable. Over the following weeks, Maya assembled a team of experts in civil rights law, corporate diversity initiatives, and transportation regulations. Together, they conducted a comprehensive audit of the airline's practices, from hiring and promotion patterns to customer service protocols and complaint resolution procedures. Their findings confirmed what Maya had suspected. The airline's problems extended far beyond isolated incidents. There were systemic biases built into everything from the algorithm that assigns seats to the metrics used to evaluate employee performance. Your customer satisfaction surveys are inherently biased, Maya explained during a presentation to the airline's executive team. They overrepresent certain demographic groups while minimizing or excluding others entirely. You're optimizing for the satisfaction of your white, affluent passengers at the expense of everyone else. The team's recommendations were comprehensive and far-reaching. Revamped hiring practices, modified performance metrics, expanded diversity training, revised customer service protocols, and a complete overhaul of the complaint investigation process. Implementation will be challenging, Maya acknowledged. These changes require not just policy adjustments, but a fundamental cultural shift. To her surprise, Dennis Wilson fully endorsed the plan. We've calculated the cost of inaction, he explained. It's far higher than the cost of these changes, both financially and ethically. The transformation wasn't without resistance. Some managers complained about political correctness or reverse discrimination. A small group of employees, including several of Rebecca Miller's colleagues, resigned in protest. But the majority embraced the changes, especially frontline staff who had witnessed discrimination but felt powerless to address it. Many came forward with their own stories of problematic behaviors they had observed or experienced within the company. I've been watching passengers of color get worse treatment for years, one flight attendant confided to Maya. But whenever I reported it, I was told I was being too sensitive or making trouble. As the new policies took effect, the airline experienced unexpected benefits. Employee morale improved. Customer complaints decreased across all demographic groups. The company's public image began to recover, with their commitment to equity being highlighted in industry publications. 6 months into the transformation, Dennis Wilson invited Maya to a special board meeting. Our quarterly results have exceeded expectations, he announced, displaying a chart showing the company's recovering stock price and improved customer satisfaction metrics. The changes you helped implement haven't just been morally right, they've been good for business. Maya nodded, unsurprised. Treating all customers with dignity and respect tends to be profitable. As word of the airline's transformation spread throughout the industry, Maya began receiving calls from other companies facing similar issues. The Department of Transportation launched an investigation into discriminatory practices across all major airlines, using the standards Maya had helped establish as a benchmark. Congressional representatives invited her to testify about transportation equity issues, leading to proposed legislation that would strengthen passenger protections against discrimination. Civil rights organizations recognized her work with awards and speaking engagements. But for Maya, the most meaningful outcome wasn't the professional recognition or the industry-wide impact. It was the private moment when her father called to tell her about his experience on a recent flight. "The flight attendant knew my name, Maya Harold," said his voice thick with emotion. "Not because I told her, but because they've included our story in their training. She thanked me for helping them become better." That single phone call confirmed what Maya had believed all along. True justice wasn't about punishment or retribution. It was about transformation, changing systems and cultures so that the indignities her parents had suffered would not be repeated for the next generation. The airline that had once removed her parents from a flight had become a model for industry-wide reform. And Maya Johnson, who had begun this journey seeking justice for her family, had catalyzed a movement that extended far beyond a single incident to address the deeper patterns of discrimination embedded in American life. 1 year after the incident that changed everything, Harold and Beatrice Johnson finally embarked on the anniversary cruise they had originally planned. This time they flew first class on the very airline that had once removed them personally, escorted by customer service directors who ensured every aspect of their journey was perfect. "It feels strange to fly with them again," Beatrice admitted as they settled into their seats. "But there's something powerful about returning to the scene of the battle, especially when you've won." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "It's not about forgiveness. It's about acknowledgement and change." The transformation was evident from the moment they checked in. The airline staff had been completely retrained under the new protocols Maya had helped develop. Digital screens throughout the terminal displayed the company's passenger Bill of Rights, which prominently featured protections against discriminatory treatment. Most notably, the crew from pilots to flight attendants reflected a diversity that had been lacking before. Maya joined her parents on the cruise, a rare vacation from her increasingly demanding schedule. In the years since confronting the airline, she had established her own law firm specializing in transportation discrimination cases. What began as a daughter's righteous anger had evolved into a thriving practice with national influence. "I never imagined my retirement would involve becoming a civil rights case study," Harold joked, as they sat on the cruise ship's deck watching the sunset over the Caribbean. "You always were an overachiever," dear Beatrice teased, squeezing his hand. Maya smiled at her parents' banter, grateful for their resilience and wisdom. "You two taught me everything I needed to know about standing up with dignity. I just applied your lessons on a larger scale." Their family moment was interrupted by a young couple who approached tentatively. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Are you the Johnsons from the airplane incident?" Harold nodded, accustomed to such recognition by now. "I just wanted to thank you," the woman continued. "My parents experienced something similar last year, but because of the changes your daughter helped implement, they received a completely different response." The crew member was immediately removed from the flight, and the airline provided full compensation and a sincere apology. Such encounters had become common for the Johnson family. Their experience had resonated with countless others who had suffered similar indignities in silence, believing there was no recourse. Back in Atlanta, Thomas Hayes had partnered with Maya to establish the Transportation Equity Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to documenting and addressing discrimination in all forms of public transportation. What began as his spontaneous act of allyship on that fateful flight had evolved into a committed advocacy role. "I never fully understood the reality of traveling while Black until I witnessed it firsthand," Hayes explained during a fundraising event for the initiative. "Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you can't remain silent." The impact extended far beyond a single airline or incident. The Department of Transportation had implemented new industry-wide regulations requiring standardized training, transparent reporting of discrimination complaints, and independent auditing of customer service interactions. Other transportation sectors, from railways to ride-sharing services, began adopting similar frameworks proactively. Maya's law firm had expanded to include 8 attorneys, all specializing in different aspects of transportation discrimination. They had successfully litigated cases involving airlines, bus companies, cruise lines, and taxi services, establishing precedents that strengthened protections for all travelers. "We're not just winning cases," Maya explained during an interview with Aisha Robinson, who had continued covering the story and its far-reaching implications. "We're changing the fundamental expectations of how companies interact with people of color. Dignity isn't optional. It's a right." On the final evening of their cruise, the Johnsons attended a formal dinner where they were surprised to find several of the passengers and crew members who had supported them during the original incident. Thomas Hayes had arranged the reunion as a celebration of the changes they had collectively inspired. "A year ago, we were strangers, brought together by an injustice," Hayes toasted. "Today, we're partners in a movement that's transforming how America addresses discrimination, not through dramatic confrontations, but through systematic, measurable change." Maya looked around at the diverse group of allies who had played various roles in this journey, from the passengers who had recorded the original incident to the airline employees who had risked their jobs to provide internal documentation. Their collective courage had created ripples that continued to spread. After dinner, Beatrice pulled her daughter aside for a private moment on the ship's deck. "You know what I'm most proud of?" she asked, gazing out at the moonlit ocean. "The legal victories," Maya guessed. "The policy changes." Beatrice shook her head. "I'm proud that you understood the lesson your father and I tried to teach you all your life. Sometimes it takes one person refusing to accept what everyone else has tolerated." "I had good teachers," Maya replied, embracing her mother. The following week, Maya was invited to speak at a conference on transportation equity. As she approached the podium, she spotted her parents in the front row, their faces beaming with pride. "A year ago, my parents were removed from a flight for the crime of existing while Black and expecting equal treatment," she began. "Today, I'm not here to rehash that incident, but to discuss what came after. How one moment of injustice became the catalyst for systemic change." She paused, scanning the room filled with industry executives, government officials, and civil rights advocates. "The most important lesson we learned wasn't about the power of social media or legal strategy, though both played crucial roles. It was about the transformative potential of holding companies accountable, not just for making amends, but for fundamentally changing how they operate." As Maya continued her address, outlining the measurable improvements that had resulted from their advocacy, she noticed a woman slipping quietly into the back of the room, the airline's new chief diversity officer, a position created as part of the company's transformation. The woman, Dr. Kimberly Roberts, had previously led civil rights initiatives at the Department of Justice and had been personally recruited by Dennis Wilson to oversee the airline's ongoing equity efforts. After the conference, Maya introduced Dr. Roberts to her parents. "Your daughter has set a new standard for corporate accountability," Dr. Roberts told them. "We're not just implementing her recommendations, we're using them as a foundation to build something even better." Harold nodded appreciatively. "That's how progress works. Each generation stands on the shoulders of the previous one, reaching higher." As they prepared to part ways, Beatrice asked Dr. Roberts a final question. "What happens when the media attention fades? Will these changes last?" "That was my primary concern when I took this position," Dr. Roberts admitted. "But we've built these changes into our operational DNA, our hiring practices, our training protocols, our performance metrics. They're not dependent on public pressure anymore. They're simply how we do business." That evening, as Maya helped her parents into a rideshare vehicle, she reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple request for a special meal and culminated in industry-wide transformation. "I wonder what would have happened if Rebecca Miller had just given Dad his meal that day," she mused. Beatrice smiled wisely. "Then someone else would have had to fight this battle." The problem was never just one flight attendant. It was a system that enabled and protected her behavior. Harold squeezed his daughter's hand. "You didn't just win justice for us, Maya. You created space for dignity, not just for passengers, but for everyone in the industry who wanted to do better, but didn't know how. As their vehicle pulled away, Maya glanced at her phone to find a message from a young flight attendant who had attended her conference presentation. "Today I served an elderly black couple in first class. I remembered your parents' story during our training and made sure they received the respect and care they deserved. The gentleman told me it was the first time in his life he'd felt truly welcome on a flight. Thank you for making this possible." Maya smiled, understanding that the true measure of their victory wasn't in policy documents or legal precedents, but in these small moments of dignity that would multiply across countless interactions, each one helping to bend the long arc of the moral universe just a little more toward justice. The story of the Johnson family teaches us that confronting discrimination requires both personal courage and strategic action. When faced with injustice, it's not enough to simply endure with dignity. We must also hold systems accountable. Maya succeeded not because she sought revenge, but because she identified the structural problems behind her parents' experience and pushed for comprehensive solutions. True change happens when we refuse to accept discriminatory treatment as normal. By documenting incidents, gathering allies, and applying pressure at multiple levels, legal, media, corporate, and public, we can transform isolated incidents into catalysts for systemic reform. The most powerful lesson is that justice isn't about punishing individuals, but about changing cultures and systems. Rebecca Miller was merely a symptom of deeper organizational failures. By focusing on institutional transformation rather than personal retribution, Maya created lasting change that benefited countless others facing similar discrimination. Remember that allyship matters. Thomas Hayes' decision to speak up made a critical difference. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply bear witness and refuse to remain silent when we see injustice happening around us. Has discrimination ever touched your life or the lives of your loved ones? How did you respond? If you've witnessed discrimination, did you speak up or stay silent? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story could inspire others to take action. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about everyday people creating extraordinary change. By sharing this video, you help spread awareness about discrimination and how we can effectively combat it together. Thank you for joining us on this journey of courage, perseverance, and transformative justice. Remember, as Beatrice Johnson wisely said, sometimes it takes one person refusing to accept what everyone else has tolerated. Whether you're facing discrimination yourself or witnessing it happen to others, your voice and actions matter. Until next time, may we all travel through life with dignity and respect.